Good morning. Thank you for joining us on our Adoption UK webinar today. We're talking about hints and tips for when you've got a birth child or children in the home, introducing a new little one. We've got two experienced adoptive mothers here this morning who both had birth children, and they're just going to go over the introductions period, what worked for them, things they found useful, things that they might do differently if they had their chance again. So hopefully it'll be a really informative session. It is a webinar, we can't see you, we can't hear you, so don't worry about what's going on with your background. It's all recorded if you get interrupted, and it'll be available to view on our members resources area. And please feel free to interact with the Q&A. I'll ask those questions of Holly and Charlotte later, and it'll all be anonymised, so feel free to ask whatever you'd like. So thanks very much for joining us. Thanks for sparing your precious time with us. I'll switch my camera off, but I'll still be here. So over to you, Holly, first, if that's okay with you.
Okay. Hi, everyone. So I'm Holly Marlowe. I'm an adoptive parent and birth parent. My daughter is 7 years old and my son is 3.5, and he's been home with us for about 2.5 years now. In fact, today is the 2-year anniversary of when we got the adoption order. So the main thing that I think is different about having a birth child before you adopt is, of course, that you have to prepare your birth child. And I had a very inquisitive little one while we were going through the process. She asked me loads and loads of questions. So there are lots of different things that I did to try to help to prepare her so she'd understand the whole introductions process. There's obviously in a little one's mind, when you tell them that they're going to be getting a little brother or sister, they just immediately want to meet their little brother or sister. So naturally, her first question was, great, can we go and pick him up then? So we'd had lots of chats before that about adoption in general, and I've tried to normalise it, as I'm sure many of you have also done with your children. So we'd used TV programmes to point out where families that may either have adopted, obviously, or could have adopted. So, for example, there's a programme, Hey Duggie, which many of you will probably use to point out that there's an adopted crocodile in that one who has an elephant for a mum. So just things like that we've been doing to normalise adoption as a concept. And then as intros grew a bit nearer and we passed the matching panel, we went into a bit more detail. So one of my daughter's questions for me that really struggled to answer was, why can't he stay with his birth family, when I started talking about her future brother. And that one really upset her. She got very emotional at the thought that some mums and their children can't stay together in particular. And so she actually burst into tears the first time we were talking about it. And I didn't want her worrying that that might happen to us too. So as many people know, I made up a story to help her to understand it. And that story is now a book, Deli Duck, which I've had published and is on Amazon. And essentially it's to explain why some children can't stay with their birth parents. So I just told her the story at first, and that helped her to understand it. Thankfully, no more tears after that. And she could also see the difference between the adoptive parent character and the birth parent character. And she could understand that the birth parent wasn't doing the things that needed to be done to keep the child consistently safe and look after them properly. So that was a really important part of our preparation. I also I found that she couldn't really grasp the concept of foster care immediately, and she sort of imagined that it must be like a shop with shelves of babies somewhere. And I've heard that other parents have said the same thing to me in adoption meetups. It must be just a common assumption that children sometimes need to. So obviously I wanted to explain that that's not the case. So we talk quite a lot about foster care and foster families. And at the time, we didn't really know any of them. Now our network has grown and now includes lots of adoptive and foster families, which is fantastic. Normalises it all for both of my children. But she did find that concept quite strange. So we just really talked it through. Since then, I have written another story with my daughter's help that explains the adoption process. This one, adopting a little brother or sister, and Zoe's illustrated it. It's my daughter. And it talks about what happens while you're adopting, so that social workers will come to the house and you interview them. But it also talks about the foster family and what they do and how they look after a child while the social worker is trying to find the right family for that child. And I was always careful to emphasize that it had to be the right family for the child and not the right child for our family. So, for example, she was coming up with specifications when the social worker first came around, and she said, right, so I was thinking, could you get me a little sister whose name is Rosie Posey, and I'd like her to look just like me, she should like playing with these toys and like doing these things, and of course that's just not how it works. So we did a lot of role play as well with dolls to explain the whole thing and to understand how it works, and we still do that now whenever the children have questions about different types of care, because we still find that foster children who my son lived with for a while are being moved into different kinds of placements. So some have gone into kinship placements, some have gone back to their birth families, and others are staying in long-term foster care arrangements. So it's been really helpful to explain all those kinds of things through role play. So did all that sort of thing to prepare her. It was a bit strange for us because we were adopting during lockdown, so we couldn't go and see him. But we had about 3 weeks where we had no idea when we would be able to see him. And then when we did, our first introductions were socially distanced. So we had to stay 2 meters away from him outdoors. So we had lots of picnics with the foster family, which was all a bit surreal, but children are so good at understanding these things if you just explain them. So my daughter, who was 4 at the time, understood that quite well. And we became quite creative in finding ways to help them to connect, even though they couldn't physically play together. So we got toy phones for each of them, and I dropped them off a couple of days before we were meeting so that they could be quarantined and sanitized. But my daughter had one toy phone and my son had the other. So they were pretending to chat to each other and that sort of thing. And they could still use dolls, just not close together. So we came up with a lot of different ways to bond with him remotely. I was quite worried that was going to set back the bonding, being able to see each other but not play. I thought he might feel that maybe we weren't safe because he was being pulled back whenever he tried to crawl towards us. But thankfully that wasn't the case. It was fine. And I think he could also see that the other foster children in the family were talking to us and happy, so that definitely helped. One of the major benefits of adopting during lockdown was that those children were all around. And in our initial introductions plan, we'd been told that Zoe, my daughter, would have to go to nursery or somewhere else for the first few days so that my husband and I could bond with our son. And I was a bit worried about that because I felt that she'd be upset because she'd feel emotionally pushed out. She was so excited about getting a little brother. So in a way, it was quite helpful that we had no other choice. We had to quarantine as a family and then eventually expanded our bubble to join the foster family. And so she had to come with us, and it was fantastic. And I've fed that back to our agency, I think do that more actually and involve the birth families from much earlier on. It was so beneficial for us. She didn't feel at all pushed out. She didn't resent anything, and she had a really great time playing with the other foster siblings, who my son absolutely loves. So we want to stay in contact with them and see them. So it's good that my daughter's got a bond with them now and enjoys hanging out with them. And so it's not a case of dragging her along whenever we want to see that family. She loves them. We all do. So that was great. So our introductions process took a week, and it was quite typical, really, quite standard. Apart from the initial socially distanced part of it, once we had actually come to the point where we were allowed to merge effectively with their family. We just went to their house for a couple of hours the first day, a few more hours the next day, and it grew throughout the week. We spent more time each day and eventually started bringing him to our house. One of the things my daughter struggled with that I hadn't anticipated myself either, really, and in hindsight wish I'd prepared her for, was that he was terrified of us actually touching him. He was quite happy for us to be near him, and gotten used to that with the lockdown, social distancing stuff. But the first time that each of us actually physically touched him, he burst into tears. So my daughter tried to put her arm around him at one point, and he sobbed, and that was quite devastating. So I wish that I'd prepared her for that, because obviously it is quite a scary time for a little one, and even if we hadn't had the socially distancing aspect of it, I think lots of little ones are probably frightened of people they don't know touching them. So that's something I would recommend for families about to go through introductions. Then, of course, we had the times when he would come to our house, and my daughter was incredibly excited about that. She actually cleaned the skirting boards and the doors. She was desperate to clean something, and I'd already nervously cleaned the whole house, so it wasn't really anything for her to do. So I gave her some cloths and got her to clean all the doors and skirting boards, and she even went outside and started tucking up the garden. It was incredible to see her so excited for the foster family to come, and for her little brother to come and see our house. And in our plan, it didn't actually say for the whole of the foster family to come to our house, but I asked for that to be changed because I wanted them to know that it's safe here, particularly the children. I particularly wanted them to know that we were going to be bringing the little boy that they loved so much to a safe place with lots of toys. I wanted them to see his room, where we put a photo of them that the foster carer had given us, so that they could see that they were going to be a special part of our lives. And I explained to my daughter that we were doing that. So one of the things she was very excited to do was show them that photo and say, look, we've put this up here so that we can talk about you, and you can be part of our lives from now on, because you're part of our family now too. That was wonderful. She's a very compassionate child, and that was a really wonderful moment. What else to tell you about birth child during intros? So she really enjoyed showing him round. It was a bit different for her, I think, than if we'd had another birth child, because I think when you have a baby, going by what friends and family have gone through, a newborn kind of ends up adapting to the older sibling, and they end up slotting into their routine, and so they'll need naps and things, which might be a bit of an inconvenience. But generally, I think if we'd had a little one from birth, they would have all eaten all the same foods as my daughter. They would have been introduced to the same toys, and they would have probably been introduced to the same TV programs even that she likes. And I think that would have just been less change all at once for her. But because we were adopting this son, we wanted to keep the routine that his foster carer had created for him. And it was a brilliant routine, really consistent, and lots of cues. So he knew when bedtime was coming, he had very set meal times and that sort of thing. So we wanted to try to keep as many things consistent as we possibly could. And so that did mean a few changes for my daughter that we knew were coming, but we hadn't really anticipated being so hard for her. So she really struggled with a few things. One we expected was bedtime. The bedtime routine has always typically been something that she's wanted me to do with her. And so for a few months before adopting, we introduced an extra step. So instead of me sitting in the rocking chair next to her bed until she fell asleep, I'd sit there for 5 minutes, and then I would put her CD player on, and she'd listen to some bedtime stories while I went to do housework. Usually at that time of the day I'm too tired to do housework, but she'd let me off, and then I'd go check back on her later. And that was really, really helpful, because that meant that I could essentially do the same thing, but I'd go and do my son's bedtime routine instead. So she accepted that. But the bit that she really didn't like was when my husband was busy for some reason, my son had to come in and have the bedtime story with her. And that had been such a bonding time for me and her previously that she felt quite affronted that that was being taken away. So fortunately, she's totally grown out of that now. She just wants to be with her brother all the time. But in the first few days, that was really hard for her. I think my husband he just got a phone call at the last minute or something, because that hadn't been our plan. But that's definitely something to try to avoid if story time is something that's really precious to your child. It was quite nice to see how much she does care about story time with me, actually. But yeah, that was definitely a tough one for her to deal with. And she also struggled with him wanting to watch different TV shows and us trying new foods that we knew he really liked from foster care. Because she just said to me at one point, I'm fed up of trying new things. I don't want to try anything else new. So for a while I had to cook extra meals, which is something I tend not to do. I try generally to find something that everyone likes, but it's not always possible. And that was definitely a time when it was worth being flexible. Something that is not necessarily unique to having a birth child is the social workers will recommend that you wash clothes in the same washing powders that your adopted child is used to their clothes being washed in, bedding and that sort of thing, so that the home smells like the foster home. And I kind of thought, okay, I'll do that. I don't know if it's really going to make a difference, but I've got nothing to lose. I don't think that harmed my daughter in any way. I think it was okay, but I washed loads of things, blankets and towels, big things, so that it would kind of help spread the scent throughout the home. And also my daughter's dressing gown. And it was absolutely incredible how much of a significance that smell had for my son. He was crawling at this age, and he would crawl into a room, stop and sniff the air, and then he would go over to the item in that room that I'd washed, and he'd bury his face in it and sniff and kind of go, and it was adorable. He was obviously so comforted by it. So I was really glad that I'd washed Zoe's dressing gown in that fabric, because she got so many colours from it whenever she was wearing it. So that was amazing. And I obviously immediately washed my own in that washing powder as well. But it was really special for her that she got that time with him. And we were very lucky that he moved in with us during the school holidays. And Zoe was due to start school that September, and he moved in July. So we had a good 6 weeks of just us. It was wonderful. Our little group. We also have some extended family nearby who obviously wanted to meet our son as soon as possible. And it was tricky with lockdown. We obviously couldn't have them round, but in a way I think that was helpful, because it meant that we had to have socially distanced picnics and things. We were lucky it was the summer, but it meant that they didn't have too much contact with him straight away. And that had been something I was a bit nervous about, because you're always warned that you need to stay the main carer for a certain period of time, so that if someone realises that, so in a way lockdown made that a bit easier. One thing we did do is we used our support network to help us with Zoe a bit, so that she got some attention, because we hadn't had a 1-year-old for a while, and he was adjusting to living here. His sleep was amazing for about a week, and then quite textbook honeymoon period ended, and he suddenly couldn't sleep very well. So it was all quite intense, and he needed lots of extra naps and things, and he was struggling and emotional and quite clingy. So we had some days where it was really helpful to be able to send Zoe to my mum and dad for the day, and it was really good for my son to see that she went there and then she came back and she was happy, and she was happy to go to them, and that sort of thing. So that was wonderful too. And that we did that a lot during the first few weeks of settling in. I think I've come to the point now where I'm ready for any questions, if you to move on to Charlotte.
Sorry, Holly, my screen froze then when I was trying to unmute and put my screen back on, leaving you hanging there in midair. Thank you so much. Loads to take on board there. We haven't got any questions just now, but if we hand over to Charlotte, maybe we can get some questions from the end.
Okay, great.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Charlotte, over to you.
Hi everybody, thanks Holly. It's so interesting just to hear someone else's experience of going through the same thing. Yeah, so we're a family of 5. I've got 3 daughters, myself and my husband, adopted a couple of years ago. Our eldest was 6 at the start of intro, so she just finished year 1, and then we've adopted twins who were 9 months old when they moved in. Starting with a few top tips, I would say, you prepare what you can, but you have to stay flexible, and it's such a great test of your support network, intros, I think. And I think being parents of biological children, you've got that massive asset in your direct parenting experience, but I do find sometimes there can be tensions around that as well, because there are differences, of course, and as a blended family, we sometimes didn't quite feel like we fitted into the adoptive only groups, but then also friends who have birth children don't always get it and sometimes want to kind of whitewash away any differences that might be there. So I think the approach we took to that was just try and have a collage of support and kind of take bits that you can from different groups, and you'll get each other in different ways. So that's a bit about us, quick intro. So in terms of how we went about preparing for introductions, as Holly mentioned, of course, you've got that extra task of preparing your birth child for what's coming up as well. And she was very excited. She was really positive about gaining a sibling. She's definitely kind of with us along the assessment journey. And so we tried to do what we could to keep her informed in an age appropriate way with kind of bits of information here and there. I asked her the other day, planning for this, and think, so what was it like when we were preparing? She said to me, it was exciting, it was a bit scary, and I was nervous about something going wrong, or that she wasn't going to be a good enough sister. So we spent a lot of time talking to her about how she felt, what might happen, and we used a lot of books as well, and I wish we'd had Holly's at the time as well. So books like Emma's Yucky Brother, Am I Supposed to Feel This Way? Even the Doc McStuffin's, Baby McStuffin's book. There's an Anita Jerram book all together now about a family of bunnies. And we found those useful kind of jumping off points for conversation. So we could start up a dialogue, often at bedtime when she was quite relaxed. She's also quite a creative girl. So we would do drawings together, and then that would be a time when she would open up, because we were focusing on the drawing and kind of these little kind of worries and concerns she'd been holding on to but hadn't quite felt that she could mention, would kind of come out then. So that was quite positive. We obviously made a big fuss of her and celebrated her new status as a big sister. So once I think it was after matching panel, we kind of gave her a certificate, a little badge, and a little present as well, just to say, this is a really special time for all of us. And there was another book I think we gifted her at that point, which is You're the Biggest, which is kind of generic, you're going to become a sibling book. And I did annotate it as well because it's in the singular, so I crossed out baby and put babies. And that's something we still read together and she treasures. In terms of timing of our intro, so like Holly, took place in the summer holidays, which was amazing. We kind of hadn't quite dared hope it would happen with that timing, but it thankfully did work out so that we were all free, and it actually happened to fall after our eldest's birthday. We weren't quite sure, and it was really positive in that we were able to have a party for her, make a big fuss of her, and celebrate that properly before her whole world, did kind of turn upside down for a little while. So I was quite thankful that the timing kind of hadn't overlapped with that, so we were able to kind of give her that experience. And then after moving in there, we all had four clear weeks together to really settle in and get to grips with caring for three at once. And I was going to be taking adoption leave as well, so to kind of slowly be able to manage the twins single-handedly. It definitely was a two-person job in the beginning. Something else we did in preparation was hosted loads of play dates for my eldest, to give her lots of time with her friends, but also to make sure she had other people to talk to apart from us, both confiding in her close friends, but also parents of friends who are also my friends, if you see what I mean, so that if there's things she didn't quite feel that she could say to us, as we're clearly so invested in the whole process, that she could kind of air anything there. And there were a few times where she did open up to a couple of family friends, and that was really reassuring to know that she had that resource available to her. And there also was a bit of a practical element to this, because I knew we'd need people. I knew we'd need everybody once everything really kicked off, and if I could invest and, you know, help friends out and have the little ones over, then fortunately we would then get reciprocal invites later on. And it also had the side effect of bringing our friends along on the journey with us, because we'd see each other quite often. They'd really know how everything was going, and then that was a support for us, and everyone was kind of quite fully informed as to how we were all getting on. We did do videos, which we involved our eldest daughter in. So she gave a tour of the house. She was really proud to show off, you know, what their bedroom was going to be like and where we lived. And she also read a couple of storybooks that had been some of her favourite baby books to camera, which was obviously lovely for the little ones coming, but also for her to mentally kind of adjust and think about what that might be like. So that was something that we did. Right, okay, during introduction, so I'll just whiz you quickly through what our schedule was like. We started the month with a bump into at the foster carer's home, and so we just went for a quick play. Then we had matching panel in the middle of the month, so a bit of a delay there, not delay, but a gap of time. And then the little ones came to our house for a play date, which was just a few days after matching panels, once we were confirmed. That was at our house, but without our eldest there that time, which we were quite happy with to begin in a kind of a slightly slower and gentler way, partly because there's two little ones and two of us and having our hands full. And then we had a week of kind of FaceTime and then being played, kind of voice notes and videos and things. Then we had another play date where our eldest did attend, and that was their first meeting. It was very short and sweet. You know, we had a cup of tea and some cake, and everyone left happy. And yeah, it was nice having it just quite contained. I asked my daughter how she felt about that, and she said when the day came, it was amazing. It was so cool. I felt joyful, and you could tell she was really super excited. But yeah, we took it steady. Then the kind of main section of intros face to face was a 10-day period for us. So it was kind of in two sections. There was the first section, 5 days of us visiting the foster carer's home, kind of gradually ramping up the involvement and the amount of time spent there, as Holly said, you know, a few hours, then kind of half a day, and then gradually kind of handing over that caregiving role. And that was without our eldest daughter. That was just my husband and I going to their house. And then we had a midway review, and then at that point it switched over, and the twins started coming to our house again, kind of gradually increasing the amount of time, and then we'd be responsible for you know, dropping them back home and that kind of thing. And then we had a rest day, and then it was moving in. So that's kind of a quick one through what our schedule was like. Our family finder was absolutely amazing, and there were a few tweaks that were made beforehand. We felt like it was definitely based on a dialogue, and it seemed a really sensible plan. It worked well for us. I think there was possibly one change that happened along the way where our eldest was supposed to meet us at a park for another meetup, but because of distance, it just couldn't make it work really, with us having to be with them and then have to separately being transported. So that was amended. Otherwise, I think it ran kind of more or less according to the plan, but we did feel like it was quite flexible, and if things did need to change for anyone's needs, that could have easily been accommodated. Obviously, I mentioned we had 5 days at the foster carer's home without our eldest, so we had then kind of 5 days where she needed to be cared for elsewhere. And we had a bit of change of plans because we were let down by some family members who had kind of committed to help us with some of that, so that was a bit stressful, but luckily we had kind of contingencies, and because we'd really kind of worked with our friends and family beforehand, and another close friend of the family was able to step in. And I think from my daughter's perspective, I think she still doesn't really see this as because we needed to do that, but rather that it was a privilege for her. She was so excited. She had a sleepover at her best friend's house, and she thought this was just absolutely amazing. And yeah, it was a treat for her from her point of view. And we weren't there all day every day during the 5 days, so we'd come home, we'd have family time, and when she was at home, her routine was still maintained. We did talk a lot between the two of us about how we're going to make sure we're really connecting with our eldest during the introduction period. So we made a conscious effort to spend one-on-one time with her every day, and we let her lead this, whatever it was she wanted to do, that she'd been desperate to do, whether that was going outside, Lego puzzles, whatever. And I think this is something that when she reflected back, she said she felt a bit sad that she didn't get to spend as much time with her as usual. And I think that applied during assessment as well, because we had online assessment, and she said, oh, social workers always wanted to talk to you. And yeah, so we did really try and give her that one-on-one time as much as we could. And being very little, the twins were still napping twice a day, so that was help. That gave us extra one-on-one time. And then we made sure that their bedtime was later than her bedtime, to emphasize her status as big sister, and give her that special time where she could still have her stories and so on. She'd also been given a Tony box by a family member, which initially we used during the long drives back and forth to foster carers, which was lovely because she could be entertained, but also because you can record your own voices onto it. We had different family members that had kindly given her little Tonys for this device, so if there was a bedtime that was particularly tricky, she could listen to that and still have a story, whilst we might have both been hands-on with the twins, kind of resettling them or something like that. So yeah, it ended up being quite useful, and now everybody loves it, and the little ones have grown up and they play with it too, so that's definitely a handy little device. Just thinking about expectations and things that might have been surprising. It was just as tiring physically and emotionally as everyone had warned us. And we'd been on the Adoption UK webinars, everyone said, you're going to be shattered. Yeah, we were. And I think it's, it's the talking all day, getting to know foster carers, getting to know the little ones' routines. We definitely relied on quick and easy food, much as we had, before, having our eldest prepare the freezer. We weren't ashamed of stopping at McDonald's on the way home if we just needed to, sort ourselves out for food. We also found that drive back and forth was a great time for us to discuss and digest what had gone on. They're saying that there were days when we were completely mute because we were just shattered. Yeah, that was quite handy, because then before kind of then going back into the family at home. And then beyond intros, as I mentioned, we had the kind of 4 weeks of the summer holidays to adjust from the kind of 2 pairs of hands to 1. And the kind of almost exactly as Holly described, the play dates and going around to play with friends, because everything was quite intense. We were all settling into routines. There were lots of needs and demands throughout the day with 2 very young babies, and her friends were then able to support her and us and give her a bit of space to just be herself. I did also book her into a few days of summer camp so that she could do some of the more kind of sporting and active things that actually weren't that available this particular summer to do with her. She had some friends that were going, so she was going along with a couple of friends. And then yeah, we just kind of started doing outings fairly quickly, because she needed entertaining. We weren't in a lockdown situation, and so to kind of enforce that an association because of the arrival of the little one would have probably had an adverse impact because of the context we were in at that point. So we weren't ever particularly required to do strict cocooning, and I think it's not something we particularly spoke about, but I think because of our situation, understanding that, then that's kind of positive. And it increased, increasing our confidence to get out and about as a 5 as well, managing everybody and the double buggy. And so we started to introduce the babies to friends and family on neutral ground. We just go to the park or go for a walk, and then kind of started going to more like local attractions and that kind of thing. Just slowly, bit by bit, to kind of integrate into what our new normal would become. And I think that's me. Yeah.
Thank you both. Yeah, it takes you all back thinking about double buggies and coordinating apps and all sorts. Again, really useful advice. We've got some questions come in, so if you guys are okay, we'll go with those. I don't know if this is applied to either of you, how did your biological children deal with school friends? So this member's concerned of any potential teasing or comments like your brother's not your real brother, etc. Have you experienced that at all?
We haven't experienced that at all, but I kind of preempted it by going into my daughter's class and reading my book, and kind of giving them all a little teaching session about what adoption is, and there's lots of different types of family, that sort of thing. And that's something I do. If anyone ever wants me to do that, just contact me, because I do that free of charge. And I do virtual visits as well. That's something I feel quite strongly about, because it's worked really well. A little girl in the class has actually been taken into foster care since that happened, and it was really nice that everybody in the class kind of understood it, and she's, I think, had an easier time because of it too. So that was a great side effect. But I'm always happy to do that if anyone wants some help there, because it's worked so well. They'll really understand the concept of adoption.
That's great, because there's, you know, you hear it. I work in a school also, and you hear it sort of banded round as an insult sometimes. Oh, you're adopted. And I'm also passionate. I have to cut that right in the bud, and we have to have discussions about why that's not a kind thing to say, and all the surrounding issues. And it's rarely out of malice. It's just ignorance, and sometimes they're just repeating things that they've heard and they don't even know what it means. Yes, that's great. You do that. Another question: how did you manage?
Can I just chime in on that one as well?
Sorry,
we haven't particularly had that, although our eldest is very, very outspoken, so I think she probably set them straight quite quickly if they tried to. But in terms of school, we did bring her teachers in on the journey so that they knew for her what was happening and could be there to support her as well. So, you know, available to chat to, and you know, yeah, that was quite useful.
Perfect, thank you. This member, they've got matching panel at the end of the month, so hoping the intros are going to coincide with February half term. How did you coordinate your birth child going back to school and you staying back with the new child or babies? Should we start with Charlotte?
I think from a practical point of view, we're quite lucky because we don't have a long commute to school, so we would just all walk over there together and then come back home. Yeah, it became another point in our routine, you know, our daily routine. It gave us that kind of punctuation. Yeah,
just extra coordination needed for the school run. Holly?
So my daughter was really sad about leaving her little brother, and she was worried that she was going to miss out on things. So I reassured her that he was mostly going to be napping while she was away. So that helped. But also we would draw pictures for her, so that when she came back I could say, oh look, he's made you this today, you know, just a piece of paper that was scribbled all over, but she loved it. And she also started making him things, so she'd bring home things that she'd made during their sort of craft sessions at school, because she was only in reception, so it was quite free reign there, you know, they can do what they like. So she brought home a lot of drawings and things for them. But I basically would fill her in on everything we'd done all day, and I took lots of photos and showed her. And she was just really excited to introduce him to everybody at school. So at the end of every single school day, she would introduce him to everyone in the playground, even though they'd all been introduced to him every single day for however many weeks before. And she still does it now sometimes, and I have to remind her, everybody knows who he is. He must be the most famous boy in school, because she just introduces him to everyone. So she was quite excited to have the opportunity to show him off. So I think if you're in that situation and you're able to bring the younger sibling to school pickup, that's definitely been a big hit for us.
Yeah, that's great. And it's lovely to hear they've got such pride in their new little addition or additions. It's really nice to hear. I think that's it, the questions for now. Thank you both so much for sharing your story. Loads of interesting hints and tips. I love the thought about washing her dressing gown in the washing powder, because you just sort of concentrate on their bedding and stuff, but it makes perfect sense that it sort of makes them feel more amalgamated into the family home. We do have a longer question just popped in, so if you guys are okay with this. So your age gaps are quite nice between adopted child and birth child. This member has got a potential age gap of 9 years. So the birth child is coming up to 10 and the potential adopted child will be 1. Birth child is well adjusted, happy, bright, and very understanding of the little one and a great role model, very good with younger cousins, but is also very used to his space. So their concern is, and I guess I'm not sure how much you'll be able to comment on this, having not, you know, experienced this age gap. They're concerned that it's going to interrupt life as the birth child has always known it. and concerned that as they grow older, sort of the age gap might be an issue. My gut is, I know loads of siblings, birth, adopted, otherwise, that are close, thick as thieves, sort of quite ambivalent to each other, and I can't see a pattern between age gap and relationship, actually. And when I look around my sort of cousins, family, extended family, families, adopted families I've met through this job, there doesn't really seem to be a pattern. And sometimes when there's a wider age gap, sometimes that can be really beneficial, because, as you say, you know, your birth child could be a great role model for the adopted child, and in very few years a great help practically around the house in terms of, you know, living babysitting, if you think that's going to be appropriate. I just think it depends on personalities and compatibility. I'm not sure what you guys think about that.
I think we ended up with a bigger gap than we'd initially anticipated when we kind of started the process, and it's been a real asset. Because that level of understanding is there, and practically speaking, a lot more of the routines of our eldest were independent routines already, and I think that's just proven to make life a lot simpler, because you can explain things and have them understood, as opposed to just that kind of potentially butting up against who wants to do what. There is perhaps less overlap in terms of you're planning an outing, the things that the really little ones might want to do and the older ones, but then there is overlap as well. And yeah, we try and strike a balance between allowing our eldest interests and activities to be supported, with also doing things as a family, and then also doing things that the little ones will enjoy. So it's just, I think, finding that balance and rhythm for your own family, isn't it? And as I said, that bigger age gap has been definitely an asset for us.
We had a slightly bigger age gap than we expected to, actually. Although it is still quite a small one, I recognise that. But one of the things that helped us to feel confident that it would be okay is to look after friends' children who were the same sort of age as our son. And seeing my daughter interact with them, that gave me a lot of confidence that she was enjoying it. She wasn't just being polite, because the little one's parents had gone away somewhere. I was looking after their child for the day, so she could have just sulked. There was no one watching and judging. She definitely wasn't putting on a show. She was having a nice time playing with them and bonding with them, and she wanted them to come back. She wanted them to stay for longer and that sort of thing. So that gave me a lot of confidence that she would be able to relate to and connect with a child of that sort of age, even though they have different interests. She enjoys playing with younger children, and because she's a bit older, she can do stuff by herself if she needs a break anyway.
Yeah, I think, as you said, there's pros and there's cons, and they've signed off by saying, am I suddenly just worrying without need? I think that's a fairly good summation of parenthood. You will be worrying without need on things that you need to be worrying about and things that you don't need to be worrying about. So yeah, I would say good luck, and I think, you know, you only know, you love what you know, don't you? And you'll become an expert in your own situation fairly quick, as I'm sure you all have. Comment from here, you've been amazing, thank you. I would echo that. Thanks so much for coming on and sharing your experiences. Really useful for those people who, as we've heard, are either just at the beginning of the journey or getting close to panel, and sort of need to think these practical hints and tips fairly shortly. So thank you everyone for joining us this morning. Charlotte and Holly, thank you so much for your time, and I hope that's been useful. It's all been recorded. It will be available on our members resources area tomorrow, should you want to watch it back. So thanks very much, guys, and I hope you have a lovely day. Thank you.